Welcome back to This Week in Africa. In East Africa, protesters in Kenya's capital Nairobi have staged a demonstration against police brutality, demanding justice for the victims of extrajudicial killings. The crowd of some 200 demonstrators in Mathare, a densely populated settlement in Nairobi, was composed mostly of young people and mothers who carried signs with the names of friends, neighbors, and sons killed in police operations in recent years. This was triggered by the rise in police killings and brutality, especially since the imposition of the curfew by the government due to COVID-19. In recent days, cities around the world have seen enormous protests against police brutality and racism following the killing of another black man in the United States, George Floyd, at the hands of white officers. Activists in Kenya have taken to social media to draw parallels with the country's own scourge of police brutality, which typically goes unpunished. Hopefully, their voices will finally be heard. Next to Burundi, where the Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza has died at the age of 55 after suffering what the government said was a heart attack 2 months before he was scheduled to step down. Nkurunziza died at the Karusi Hospital in eastern Burundi 2 days after he reported feeling unwell and was taken to the facility, the government said. This is rather untimely as Nkurunziza had finally decided to step down from his presidency, but we leave any further interpretations to conspiracy theorists. If any new information comes up this week in Africa, we'll let you know. That has been it for East African news. Goodbye.
This week in Southern Africa, as the anniversary of Soweto uprisings of June 16, 1976 approach, we remember the young people who fought for their rights and demanded an education that was not in Afrikaans, which was at that time the language of the oppressor. This past week, we've seen students of color in South Africa take stances on social media platforms such as Instagram and Twitter to expose racism and classism at elite schools in South Africa. These students of color are fighting to be regarded equally by the institutions, and they continue to oppose the systemic racism and classism that is apparent in these systems. This display of youth of color fighting for what is right is similar in some regards to the fight of many students in June 16, 1976. And the fact that both of these uprisings are happening in June is quite an amazing coincidence. It's reassuring to see young people using their voices to fight for what they believe in and to force conversations that need to happen. These events leave me wondering how strong we are as youth and what place we have in transforming these institutions into places where students of color feel safe. It also leaves me wondering how long will this transformation take and what role will we have to play? What role will you have to play? With your news from Southern Africa, this has been Malaika Kumalo. Have a great week.
Hello everyone and welcome to This Week in Africa. In North Africa, the Moroccan writer Youssef Amin Al-Alami won the Orange Book Prize in Africa. The Orange Book Prize rewards a literary work written in French by an African author and published by a publishing house based on the African continent. The aim is to promote access to culture and knowledge. The story is about a young actor fleeing war and climate disasters leaves his country and tries to reach Europe. Throughout his journey and during his stay in a refugee camp, he brings to life the stories of the very diverse refugees he meets. This narration represents an open window on the feelings and experiences of the exiled. It also offers a very fine vision of human beings. This is a good book for the literature department to consider in order to add more North African representation in the school's curriculum. In northern Mali, the notorious Algerian leader of Al-Qaeda in North Africa, Abdel Malik Droughtel, has been killed by the G5 Sahel forces, which are made of Niger, Mauritania, Chad, Mali, and Burkina Faso, and their partners. Congratulations to those countries because this came after their extensive efforts to eradicate terrorist groups in the Sahel region. But is the cutting of the head of a spider enough to kill it? The fight against terrorism is still going on. Moving to Libya, the United States has been decelerating the peace process in the North African country. The civil war that is still going on after 9 years all started with a Tunisian street vendor who set himself on fire because of injustice. But in Libya, the conflict escalated to another whole level. Now it threatens the peace and security in the whole region. The UN Special Envoy to Libya plays an important role in the peace negotiations. Now, after the previous one, Ghassan Salamé, left because of health issues, the position is still deserted for more than 3 months. Antonio Guterres proposed the Algerian ex-minister of Foreign Affairs, Ramtan Lamamra, but Washington has vetoed his nomination without explanation. Another name was proposed. It was Hannah Cheche, the Ghanaian ex-minister of Foreign Affairs. Once again, the Americans were not convinced by her profile. Those unexplained actions only make the peace process in Libya slower, leading to more lost lives, more human trafficking, and more conflict. Thank you, and see you next week.
This week in Africa, within the West African region, between the Sahara to the north and the Sudanian savannah to the south, lies the Sahel region. The multinational joint task force set up by the four countries Chad, Niger, Nigeria, and Cameroon bordering Lake Chad, and later joined by Benin, continues to be challenged as attacks by Boko Haram and criminal gangs are reported in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Having crippled life in the border towns and areas, forcing people to flee their homes multiple times due to increasingly brutal attacks from multiple armed groups in the volatile Central Sahel region, reports of more than 3 million, including 831,000 refugees, being displaced has marked the Sahel region as one of the fastest growing displacement crisis points in the world. Moving on to Nigeria, having spearhead negotiations with the Paris Club of Creditors that led to the wiping out of $30 billion of Nigeria's debt, and being a recently appointed member of South Africa's Presidential Advisory Council. With over 30 years of development and financial expertise, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, being the first female Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Finance, twice in Nigeria, has been nominated by the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari and is supported by Benin as a potential candidate for the Director General position of the World Trade Organization, which is still yet to be held by an African. That has been the headline news of the week in the West African region of Africa, with myself, Jabachi Mwogu, as your host. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.